Welcome to a Simple Therapy podcast. Real conversations, brave stories, and simple, soulful insights for therapists and anyone on a healing journey. I'm Sindee Gozansky, licensed therapist, supervisor, and a fellow human figuring it out too. Around here, we believe healing doesn't have to be complicated, and that leading with your heart still matters. We talk about what it really means to be human in and out of the therapy room. You'll hear from therapists, mental health professionals, and people courageously sharing their personal healing journeys. Because whether you're the therapist or the client, we're all human here. Let's keep it simple and keep showing up. Hello and welcome to another episode of a Simple Therapy podcast. I'm Sindee Gozansky, your host, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you to my guest today, Monica DiCristina. Let me give you a little background on her. Monica DiCristina has been a practicing therapist in Atlanta, Georgia for over 15 years. She is also a sought-after speaker, podcaster, and writer on topics of emotional healing and mental health. Combining her extensive therapeutic knowledge with creativity, empathy, storytelling, and her deeply rooted faith, she is passionate about walking alongside those bravely unraveling their difficult experiences and providing a path for them to do the brave and sacred work of transformation and healing. Monica understands the audible sigh of relief that comes when finally understanding our pain. As a child and young adult, she struggled to find a name for her mental health struggles until a caring therapist gave her the guidance she needed. Today, her heartfelt mission is to collaborate with and make space for others on their journeys toward mental wellness. Oh my goodness. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to talk with you.
I am too. And just as, I read your biography, so much resonates for me that there was a therapist, a caring person who helped you just like we hope to be for other people.
Yeah.
And that you've had your own mental health journeys. And, I don't know anybody who could say like they haven't, but to be vulnerable, and out about that, that's huge. And then it seems like it inspired you to write this book. And you say also, I'm hoping to put myself out of business between my book and everything.
Yes.
So this is all to me so inspiring, and also that it's guided by your faith. And I think many of us recognize how important it is to have, something greater in our lives. So I can't wait for this conversation.
Right.
Let's start with your book because that's your baby. It came out in May. The book is Your Pain Has a Name. And why don't you take it from there?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have my book here, like we talked about. Your Pain Has a Name. And I did write it, as you mentioned, really inspired not just by my own story, but then by my decision and then work as a therapist, that I knew in my bones what it was like to live for years hurting and not knowing why. And I became a therapist because I didn't want anyone else to have to suffer that way, right? And as you know, as a therapist, people walk into your office and they know they're hurting. They know something doesn't feel right in a big or small chronic way, but they don't know why. And I have found that if we can name that, then we can begin to not only find what they need, but we can begin to help them separate who they are from the stories that they've believed about themselves from their unnamed pain. Because unnamed pain really is not innocuous, right? It tells stories, right? And that's why it's so important. I hoped in this book to not just help people name certain pains, but also empower them to learn how to do that themselves.
And as it tells the stories, which often aren't true, it hides so much of our genuineness, our own essence and self-worth. And I love how you start to kind of unravel that and untangle that.
Yeah.
So backing up, this gives listeners a taste of what's to come. But backing up, you said you were suffering for so long and describe having an undiagnosed anxiety disorder. And so walk us through how did you sort of, heal from that? And then how does it inform, your work and life today?
Like many people, I had undiagnosed early traumas, right? And when that happens, it shapes you, right? And I began to believe at a very young age that I was bad or something was wrong with me. And when I hit adolescence, some things happened in my larger context, and I had a rapid onset of an anxiety disorder, and not just any anxiety disorder. What I specifically struggled with was a type of OCD. People think OCD is, oh, you want to clean your kitchen or something. And it's just not that. It creates a lot of suffering for people. And I had a particular kind of symptom called ego dystonic intrusive thoughts. And ego dystonic intrusive thoughts are a type of symptom from OCD where you have scary thoughts on repeat. Scary thoughts that you don't want to have, violent thoughts. A lot of times people suffer with that when they are in a postpartum time, right? And that is a very common time that when women will have an onset of those kind of symptoms where they fear something happening to their baby, or they fear themselves harming their baby, and then they have these scary thoughts and they don't know what to do with it. I feel like a heartbreaking thing, which I hope to help change, there's already people doing this work way ahead of me, is that people typically go 10 to 14 years without a diagnosis of OCD. So in those 10, for me, it was 10 years. In those 10 to 14 years, people think, oh my gosh, well, I'm losing my mind, or I am these thoughts, or I am this terrible person. And so it wasn't until finding a name for what I was actually struggling with that I began to really understand, oh, this is just a thought. Oh, this is an anxiety disorder. Oh, this is unresolved trauma. And I really and it isn't overnight. It's not like overnight I got a name for my pain and knew that I was okay, but it began the journey. And that's so much of my heart for people, is that so many people walk around with things that they don't understand it. And it doesn't have to be a diagnosable disorder, and it doesn't have to be a trauma. It may be a tendency to people please. It may be, an anxious attachment. It can be anything that's not a clinical diagnosis, but just, it can be grief and not know that you're carrying around grief, right? So many things that we carry around and we just don't understand what they are. So that's kind of the backstory of me.
Yes. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's so relevant even today. I know in my group practice, we have several therapists, and we'll have a group supervision, and somebody's thinking, oh, this is anxiety. And then our OCD expert comes in and says, okay, wait a second. There's something else, deeper going on here, giving that analogy of like those postpartum, terrible thoughts that really will help somebody. And if there's a listener here and you're having these bad thoughts, there is help for you. You're not going crazy.
That's right. That's right. And so many people do. And it's fascinating. As I've written this book, I've heard from so many readers, but one of the type of readers I've heard from are people who have gone for years without knowing what this is. And so that's been really encouraging for me, that people, it's hard that they didn't know, but it's encouraging that people, often learn for the first time. Like when I was writing this book, I remember talking to another writer, and she said, oh my gosh, she just had a baby. This is what I'm struggling with, and people just don't talk about it because it's embarrassing and they feel shame about it. But that's specific to me. We could scale that out to a whole number of things that people just don't talk about because it's embarrassing or they feel shame about it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And as you're saying this, Monica, because, like you said, it's also like on your heart and wanting to help people. When you say like your pain has a name, I'm not hearing this as a label.
That's right.
I'm hearing you make a distinction between the name and the label.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think that's really important. That I even say in the introduction of the book, this is not a book of clinical diagnoses. This is a posture. This is learning to listen to yourself. So many, I think women especially, are conditioned not to listen to how they feel, not to listen to what they need. And so then you go through years or life or weeks not knowing what's going on. And so it's more of a posture of, wow, I'm going to stop. I'm going to actually listen to what's hurting, and I'm going to allow myself to be curious and to figure out, maybe with help, maybe with a book, maybe with a podcast, maybe with a therapist, what's going on here. And it's not a label. It's more of an invitation, right? When I finally, that psychological relief of understanding is so important. I think we both know that sometimes clients walk into our office and they walk out so deeply relieved. And now you and I did not solve their problems in 50 minutes, right? Right.
Yeah.
But we helped them name it. We helped them sort it. We helped them understand, oh, that thing with my sister-in-law is why I was so stressed out and got irritable with my kids, right? We helped them understand it. And that's kind of what I'm after.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Giving a person like that ongoing awareness, right?
Yes.
That, like it's this continuum of awareness, invitation, curiosity.
Yes.
And then we start naming it as a pain, right? Naming it as something that
that's right.
It's where it's giving us suffering, it's giving us hurt, but it's not defining us. And
that's right.
share how you kind of, help your readers see that, like, okay, it doesn't define you, even though we think it does. I mean, 100% it does.
Yeah. And I think this is one of my, big passions, and one of my favorite parts of the book is really helping people separate who they are from what happened to them, who they are from their bad day, who they are from what hurts. And also, I think this is really important, who they are from how they've coped, right? Because sometimes it's the coping where you maybe get into addictive behaviors or, numbing behaviors or anger, these different sort of behaviors that can be destructive that are also not who you are. Of course, we need to work on the things that are not constructive in our lives, but none of these things are who you are. And I think that, we're not going to live a pain-free life. We're not going to live a life without emotional pain or physical pain. So I'm not selling that. But what I am wondering out loud with people is, can we separate your identity from what hurts? And is that a stable and safe home to return to inside of yourself, in spite of what happens?
Even as you say that, that's brilliant about also the coping behaviors that happen, and we feel shame about that. We also feel like that defines us, and that defines how other people see us. And so it's almost like you're saying, look, you've got some second chances here, third and fourth.
That's right.
Chances. This is not you, even the coping behaviors. And that could be so freeing for somebody.
Yes. Yeah, I just couldn't agree more. I think we write ourselves off too early. And I think that we feel so much shame often about what we've struggled with or the way that we've coped. And then it becomes fused with our identity. And really they're not the same thing. And it's that understanding that I think can give people hope. Like, wait a minute, if I'm not my destructive coping, then who am I? And what is possible for me? What could be possible down the line for me if I get some help?
In your book, do you help readers? I mean, I'm sure you do this in your practice too.
Yeah, sure.
We don't know, or our clients don't know who we are if these things were not a part of us.
I know.
And that can be really scary too.
Yeah, I think that, that is one of the things that's oversimplified so much, is like your true self and, returning to who you really are. And a lot of times people look at you and say, well, I don't know who that is. I've never known who that is, and I think we need to normalize that a little bit more, that it's not a 1, 2, 3. And one of the things that I help clients do early on is to start really listening to themselves. Sometimes it's something as small as being honest with themselves about where they want to go to dinner. Like something as small as that, right? Or honest with their bodies about, wow, I'm hungry, or I need to go to the restroom. That we learn so early to not listen to who we are. And that's often how we end up so far from knowing who we are. And so it's a really simple beginning step to just be honest with yourself without any pressure to act on it. That's why oftentimes people are afraid to listen to themselves, because they think, gosh, if I'm honest with myself, then I've got to do A, B, and C. Then that's 2 steps down the line, right? First, just learning to just listen to what you're trying to tell yourself, because you will hear things. You'll hear what your body's trying to say and what your mind and heart are trying to say.
I have a colleague who talks about like the trauma whispers, and you kind of, intimate that with those things we hear, like, when you said, if you want to go a certain place to dinner, or when you can go to the bathroom, when you can sleep. And those trauma whispers are like, oh no, that's not safe. I can't do that. Oh. But then there's this like identity, hope or whisper that starts to happen that we can become friends with, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's listening to that part of you that is that, and that's great language, that trauma whisper, and learning to say that part, like, you're safe. Like you're safe. And it's okay to do what you need now. I mean, that's part of returning home to yourself is hearing those narratives that have been there from pain for a long time and naming them, really. I mean, being like, well, there it is. That's a trauma whisper. It's a great language.
Yes. Shout out to Steve and Andrew on that one.
Yeah.
Is this part of like the move away from quick fix? Like you said, people, right, they think like, oh, we can do this kind of like fast and there's got to be an answer. And you look on TikTok and try to figure it out, slap a label and go.
Yes. Gosh. I mean, you just, I could talk for hours about this. I think that the destigmatization of mental health being on social media is super helpful. It's wonderful. I think an unintended byproduct has been the selling of quick fix mental health, right? Has been selling of 1, 2, 3 steps to never feeling anxious again. Right? I mean, I'm someone who would consider myself very healed from the things that I went through. I'll still get anxious. I mean, that's a realistic view of it. And so the quick fixes are not only inaccurate, I think they can be dangerous because when people are hurting, they're the ones going for the quick fix, right? They're the ones when we're hurting. That's who's attracted to it. And then when it doesn't work, you're left thinking, oh gosh, well, there really is something wrong with me because they said that this quick fix would work and they have all these followers on TikTok and it didn't work for me. And I think the reality, as you know, of the human experience is so much more complex. It's so much more layered. And I really think of healing as a practice, not as a destination. It's something that we learn to intentionally practice what's true. Practice emotional safety, practice listening to ourselves, practice rewriting our narratives. And those are not quick fixes, but they are hopeful.
We need you on TikTok if you're not already there.
My husband has suggested that. I have an account. It's so overwhelming.
Oh,
I mean, gosh.
But, I love that you started in there, right? Like this is part of the cultural context where mental health has been destigmatized. And I am all about that, and mental health awareness and, really just opening up those conversations. But then there's a cost that maybe, people don't even turn to therapists or to, trusted advisors in, in whatever world they're comfortable with.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're being told the answer can be solved in 3 minutes, the idea of going to see someone for 50 minutes for 6 months, just doesn't sound as attractive, right? And that's understandable. And of course, there's a lot of barriers to good mental health care that can be financial and otherwise. But yeah, I think that it's an unpleasant, unnecessary, and unhelpful byproduct of all of the popular talk that's out there about mental health and trauma. Again, which I am so glad about, but I think it leaves a lot of people feeling like, oh, I should be able to change this fast. And it's just not realistic.
We kind of need like the therapist that follows the slow food movement or something like that.
That's right. Yes.
But maybe not going back quite as far as like psychoanalytic movement where you're in the office 4 days a week, like that would maybe be too slow for our culture.
Yes.
No shade to the psychoanalysts out there. We love you all too.
Yes, we absolutely do. But yes, maybe not that far for most people that just can't afford it time-wise or financially. But I think it's just a realistic model of human change, like therapy or not. Humans don't change with quick fix advice. They just don't change. They may have a moment of insight, which is amazing. I love insight, but insight is not the same as the long, slow work of behavioral change, of rewiring your brain. It just takes time and repetition.
Years ago, one of my professors said something like, insight is the booby prize. And so I share that with my student interns. I mean, we do love insight, but there's more that we need with healing.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And and when people are left with just insight, like fantastic TikTok videos with millions of views, it's fantastic insight, that doesn't necessarily produce change.
Oh, this is so invigorating.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
The same way.
Great. I am looking at my notes because there's so much here I want to talk about. That notion of separating our identity from the wounding. How does somebody even begin to start like walking through
Great
that
question.
of separating who they are from
hmm
what happened to them?
I think one of the early steps is to begin to listen to people have different language for this. So different to listen to the narratives you have believed about yourself, because it's not just that something happens to you or you get hurt or you're betrayed. It's the interpretation that sticks with you. It's the lens that you look at it and yourself through from then on. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's beginning, people have different language. Like there's the old, I think it's CBT language of silent assumptions, right? The silent, some people use the language of, and my therapist did when I was, I first saw him, of core beliefs.
Yeah.
Right. These are not your values. These are, I often tell clients, like when you leave a stressful work meeting or a dinner out with friends and it didn't go great, it's not, and you're driving home or you're riding the subway home, what are you hearing in your head? That's where we start to listen and to hear, like, I'm too much, or they don't really like me, or I don't belong, or I'll never be good enough for them, or if they only knew who I really am, right? Those things, when we start to actually hear them, they're kind of like, I don't know if you use this in your therapy office. We use the sound machines in the hall so that people can't hear you, right?
Yes.
Or people have those with babies or toddlers. The sound machine, you forget it's there. Right? It's on all
sort
day.
of. It drives me crazy.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So some of us more than others. Yeah. I forget it's there. Or the airplane noise. If you're on an airplane, you forget it's there.
Yeah, true.
But if you tune in and start to hear it, wow, is it loud?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much like that with these narratives we have believed about ourselves from our unnamed pain, whatever that is. We walk around with this background noise always in every interaction. And so a first step is to start to really listen, like, what am I believing about myself in these micro moments? And when you start to catch that, you can start to name what that narrative is. And then you start to really hear it, like hearing that airplane noise, right? Then you're aware of it all the time, right? And that's the first step, is that awareness. And then you have choices. Do I want to keep believing this? Is this actually true? Or can I start to replace this with what's more accurate and loving and true?
Did you know 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health issue this year? That's why I created Mental Health Threads, to spread awareness and break the stigma around mental health. At mentalhealththreads.etsy.com, you'll find a collection of inspiring and fun products, from t-shirts and hoodies to mugs, hats, candles, and more, all featuring positive messages that encourage self-care and mental well-being. Best sellers like Go to Therapy, Love Wins, and Still Here are fan favorites, along with our signature semicolon designs and Pride collection. Therapists especially love our exclusive items like Licensed Listener and Professional Secret Keeper. Our mission is to spark important conversations and remind you that you are not alone. If you're ready to make a statement and support mental health, head on over to mentalhealththreads.etsy.com today. Let's make mental health a priority together.
Yeah. So that's where the self-compassion practices come in.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm such a fan of Kristen Neff and her teachings on self-compassion. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's really brilliant. I love, Monica, the analogy, the white noise or the airplane noise.
Yeah.
If a listener wants a homework assignment, right? That's perfect. What is that white noise that you're tuning out? I know I have a lot of it, right? My therapist, I still see a therapist and she's calling me on that all the time. And often it's very surprising because we think that's normal. Everybody is hearing this, and they're not.
No, they're not. It's very you specific. It's very story specific, which again comes back to listening to your life and listening to your own story, right? Because there are common themes that a lot of us may fall under hearing certain things, but it's going to be very specific to, what your story is, like perhaps it's, I can't trust people that act like this, or I can't trust myself in this situation, or I'm not good enough for this opportunity. That it could really be anything, but it typically comes down to 2 areas. is identity and safety. And a lot of people write about this, including Dr. Terry Hargrave and Dr. Dan Siegel write about that we are always asking, our amygdala, our brains are asking two questions. Am I safe? And am I loved?
Yeah.
And for most of us in this world, just because it's not perfect, even if we had a great upbringing, we had some answers to those questions that were not the kindest.
And I know you do some EFT and the therapy from Dr. Hargrave. And even with EFT and couples, those are the questions of attachment and relational security. Are you there for me? Can I count on you? Am I safe and am I lovable?
Yes, exactly. And so if people are listening and wondering, well, what kind of narratives am I listening for? Those are the kind of narratives you're listening for. Am I safe? Do I feel like I can trust other people? And of course, there are people that are not trustable, but or do I feel like I'm worthy of love? Do I feel like I'm lovable? Yeah. And whatever unique iteration, that has to do with your story, they typically are going to fall in one of those trust or worth and love categories.
Then I think, Monica, you offer something that we really need, right? Often an individual needs somebody else who believes in their innate worthiness, their innate goodness.
Yes.
And because, when you say, like, am I worthy of love? Am I good enough? If all of the messages say, well, no, not really.
Yeah.
You have to have somebody who can help you believe that until it's like in your essence and it's restored to you, like your original nature. And I know, like, that's part of your faith principles. Some people may, abide by that and share that, others not. But I think it's critical.
I think so too. And as a therapist, I'm trained to follow the lead of my client. So if a client is interested in talking about faith, we will. If a client is not, then we won't.
Yeah.
But, so sometimes that is something that does help inform someone's sense of worth, is what they believe God believes about them. But sometimes if that doesn't feel comfortable for someone, there's other ways. And one of my favorite ways that I was trained in is, and this might sound a little cheesy, but stay with me, is who are you on your best day? And so, when I was in a training with Dr. Terry Hargrave, one of the examples he gave was of a woman who was so deeply clinically depressed and couldn't function as one cannot in that state. And was being helped to recall that she was also the same person who had climbed this huge peak. And in this therapeutic process, even standing up and putting her foot on a chair and acting out, being at the top of the summit.
Wow.
And the sense of, you may feel too depressed to get off the sofa, and that's real, and that pain matters, and we need to deal with that. But that's not the definition of who you are. That is pain, and it's painful, but the definition of who you are is this person who is able to summit, to get to the top of the summit, right?
There's so much unlocking to be done for people.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that language.
Really, some of these examples, and I imagine there are even more in your book, all of the reviews have so many accolades of how relatable your writing is and your examples and your metaphors. And I think we're experiencing that, in our conversation today, which is great. And that just makes it so much more real.
When I first went to see a therapist, I was scared. I was terrified that it was going to be a clinically cold experience where someone was going to look down their nose at me and tell me what was wrong with me. That all of my greatest fears about being judged and those sort of things were going to come true. And of course, that's not what happened, because that wouldn't be good therapy. But I think oftentimes there can be too much of a clinical separation between what's really helpful for people and the true scientific knowledge that we need, that our field is based on, right? And so I like to think of it as like kitchen table wisdom, that wisdom that is accessible, is metaphorical. We can picture it, we can feel it, we can taste it, we can have more access to it. You and I could throw all around a bunch of big words that, we've read in a book or we've studied or whatever. And it's going to be the rare client that's going to be helpful for, right? Because we just need language that we emotionally can understand. It's not a matter of education or intelligence. It's a matter of emotionally understanding something.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Fully. I mean, that's why I call this a simple therapy podcast.
Yeah.
I think we really need to connect on whatever level makes that
Yes.
happen. What else can someone expect to find in Your Pain Has a Name, your book, Monica?
Oh, well, thank you. I hope what they can find is, I heard this feedback from a reader who tracked me down and said, I've read a lot of these kind of books, and yours was different because you went first, because you shared your story. It made it more believable for me to interact with these therapeutic concepts. And it was a really intentional choice. As you know, in our line of work, we do not share our story because that wouldn't be therapy, right? But so it was an intentional choice to do that. And that's only the first chapter. The rest of the book is not about me. But what people can expect is to feel like they're not alone and like someone goes first in the book, and then a lot of stories and a lot of metaphors. I always wanted to be an artist. That's what I wanted to do and loved to paint. And I still love that, but I love to work with words even more. And so my hope is that the book feels like therapeutic and like a good experience in that artistic way.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad you found a craft for your calling.
Yeah. Exactly. This feels more aligned with the rest of my calling is to, paint with words, as my friend says.
Paint with words. That's great.
Yeah.
And, I think as therapists, I used to say, well, I'm not creative because I'm not like making something or a maker.
Right.
And then I realized like you have to be so creative and organic as a therapist and, like go with whatever is coming up. And so I think there is a lot of organicity and art to it, but
yes, I couldn't agree more. And I actually say that in the introduction or somewhere that I think therapy is more of an art than a science. I mean, it's based on science and it has to be, but the practice of it, I think, has an artistic nature because you're creating an environment, you're creating an experience, and you have to be flexible and move. And each person is so different. Yeah.
Which, again, for newer therapists can be hard because, they want to follow like a certain approach or modalities. And, sometimes that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Monica, you said something so beautiful about you went first in the book and shared your vulnerable story about mental health. Monica, you reminded me of this amazing quote from Jamie Kern Lima, who is, an entrepreneur and an author and influencer. And she talked about her story. And she would say, "You're not crazy, you're just first." So when she wanted to start a business and people would say she's crazy, even though it was maybe failing, or she wanted to try something outside the box, she said, "You're not crazy, you're just first." And that's like the same with you, with your chapter and what you're giving people. It's really, really cool.
I love that. I love that quote. I had not heard that quote. And that is so, thank you, first of all. That's so meaningful to me personally.
It resonates.
And thank you. And it also makes me think about listeners who might be listening, who may be the first people in their family to change the legacy, to call out something that is not healthy and everyone else just acted like it was normal and that it was okay and it wasn't. That I love that quote in so many ways. Yeah. Thank you for that.
That's what it's all about. That legacy and, breaking cycles and changing legacy.
Yeah.
And, we all have those gifts to do that.
Yes.
So that takes me to this other concept you have that I don't know what it means.
Okay.
Redrawing your family map.
This is another attempt for me to use metaphorical language for us to understand really difficult concepts. As therapists, we talk about your family of origin. And people are like, okay, why do you want to know all about my family? I mean, right? The stereotype is true though, because it's your first social group. It's where you learn so much about who you are in the world and what to expect. But I think of it like a map. It's like, oh, okay, well, I can only go left. If you're trying to get to a destination of happiness, say, on a map, I can only go left here and I can only go right here. Oh, and there's a big lake here I can't cross. We are given a set of often unspoken instructions from our family of origin about what to expect, what's okay, who we're allowed to be, and who we're not allowed to be, right? And that draws a whole map for our lives that unexamined can really dictate a lot of our choices. And that is the naming process also, is naming the family map you were given. Are you allowed to cry? Are you allowed to have a hard day? Do you always have to be pleasing to get love or attention? Like, what was the map that you were given about your life? And once you're able to identify that, you're not just going to be unconsciously acting it out. You're going to have choices.
Yeah.
I mean, difficult choices, right? Not overnight change, as we said, but you'll have choices.
Right. And really it's broadening that range of choice in your experiences.
Yeah.
I love the directions with the map. I mean, I think anybody who heard you say that is thinking, oh, well, maybe my mother, we could only go right. Maybe my mother, my stepfather only left, and that equaled something.
Exactly.
In terms of, could you have a voice, or, all of those things you said. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd be remiss not to mention boundaries. So I guess boundaries come into play with the family. And
yes. Yeah. I have a whole chapter on boundaries. And listen, I don't know about you as a therapist. Like if I'm ever doing speaking somewhere, it doesn't matter what we were talking about. Everybody just wants to talk about boundaries. Like if there's a boundary section, the Q&A time will be all about boundaries, because it's such a real topic for so many people. But what I find is that we just wag our finger at ourselves and each other too much. Like, just have better boundaries, just say no, all this sort of oversimplistic language. And what I try to dive into is the hidden why. Why is it hard for you to say no? Why do you feel like you can only say yes? And that is often where people can find more freedom, instead of just chastising themselves, using that self-compassion, like, okay, and that curiosity, why am I so afraid to say no about this ask? And oftentimes that will come back to, well, that was the only way that I was taught to love, and I think it can even go into the fawning idea, that idea of fawning, right? There's fight, flight, freeze. Fawn is another one that people have identified. That is, you become very, very pleasing in order to stay safe. And I think for a lot of people, their upbringing was chaotic or critical enough that they became very, very pleasing to feel emotionally safe. And many have not outgrown that, because they didn't know that that's what that was, right? They just think, oh, I always say yes. And they're just hard on themselves, when I've yet to meet someone who doesn't make sense. Everybody makes sense when we start to trace it all the way back.
Yeah, that's a great line. Everyone makes sense.
They do. I mean, I've yet to meet someone who doesn't. It doesn't mean we want to stay this way, or it doesn't mean everything's working, right? It's not a free pass, but I've yet to see someone or meet a couple that's like, well, oh, this is why. This is why you're struggling with this.
Just to touch on that why question. I know that that's been like really developed, like with Find Your Why with Simon Sinek and all of that. Also, I will say, years ago when I was trained as a Gestalt therapist, like why was one of those experiential questions we were supposed to kind of avoid, because it has, in a way, like a flavor of blame to it, or kind of like maybe not blame, but shame, responsibility, something. And I really want to point out how you're using it and how we're using it in a more, like present day situation, is with this curiosity, with this invitation. To really like unpack any kind of shame or blame. And it's about curiosity instead of like, you're wrong.
Yes. Such an important clarification. Thank you. That, the why is a loving why. It's an assumption that, you're struggling to say no and you make sense. So as a way to love you and a way to help you get more free, we're going to try to discover together, well, who taught you can't say no? Where did you learn that? Because you learned that somewhere. People do not struggle with boundaries because they want to. No one would choose that, right? People struggle with boundaries because at some point they believed that they needed to not say no to these things, because it was the only way to keep love, or to stay emotionally safe, or to stay in the group at school.
So much here we could continue to dive into. This is really so moving for me, Monica, and so informative. And I really want people to be able to find out more about you and connect with you and your great website, before we do that, I want to just kind of, come up with a couple little short takeaways.
Sure.
And first one is just like for therapists who really are wanting to help their clients kind of get to this place where they can see beneath the pain, see their innate worth, despite what happened to them, but that's not their identity. You've talked about so much of the process and kind of slowing it down, not going for the quick fix. What's a sort of succinct message you'd want to tell the therapist who really wants to work kind of from this approach that you're doing, because it really seems to have so much healing value?
I love that question. For therapists listening, what comes to mind right now is the power of the therapeutic relationship, that you are a different experience for that person. You are someone who is going to model for them that compassion and that curiosity. You are someone who's going to assume that they make sense in a loving way. You're someone that's going to model listening to them because their story matters. And you may be one of the first people to ever do that, right? And as you do that, as you model that listening and that kindness and that compassion, you're teaching that client that they're worthy of that, and that hopefully they can internalize that as well and begin to listen and honor their own story. So I would say to not underestimate your presence as a therapist.
What a gift. What a gift, Monica. That's so beautiful. We need to hear that. I hope people rewind it. Okay. And for the listener, and it could be a therapist, it could be somebody listening.
Yeah.
Because we're all human here. And we're feeling afraid to face our pain. What's the first gentle step that we could take to know that, like, healing's possible and we can turn toward the pain a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's such an important place to land, is that we're taught to run from pain. We are taught that we can't handle it and to run from it. And what I've found is that then we often are running away from ourselves. And so I would encourage people to think about it like this. Like, if a child were to come up to you or I right now, or to a listener right now, and they had a skinned knee, right? And they were crying, you would not bend down to that child and say, oh, well, you should have tied your shoe. So-and-so's not crying, right? You would bend down and say, show me where it hurts. What's hurting? What's wrong? I'm listening. And I think that it can feel really scary for people to listen to their pain. But when we put it in a picture like that, it's moving towards yourself. It's not solving it. And sometimes it's going to be hard to feel it. But don't you deserve that same tenderness that a child who came up to you deserves, and that you would never walk away from them and ignore them? It's very similar with yourself. It is turning towards yourself with that self-compassion and that kindness and saying, what's hurting? I'm listening. I'm not going anywhere.
Thank you. Thank you. And we deserve that tenderness and compassion. So important. Well, Monica, I just really acknowledge you for the beautiful work you're doing in the world, in your professional life, and as a therapist and as an author and a speaker. And, just here, it's amazing. I hope people will find your book, Your Pain Has a Name, but let's share, your website and all of the places they can find you.
Sure, absolutely. So my website is just my name, monicadicristina.com. And there is no H in DiCristina. That's a common confusion. And then on Instagram, I'm also Monica DiCristina. And those are two fantastic places to find the book, find what I'm doing. And on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. And so I have a weekly newsletter that is, in the world of Instagram, it's a mess out there. My newsletter is a way that I can write longer form and more thoughtfully than a small square can provide. And so that's where you can sign up for that too. And you can get my book anywhere that books are sold, anywhere that you want to support.
And sign up for the newsletter, because that's the slower healing process we need to take in. Monica has a podcast called Still Becoming Podcast, which is great. We're going to link to that. I'll link to the
Great.
book. Your Pain Has a Name, various places, and everything else. And I still need to read it. So now I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you too, Monica.
Thanks for listening to A Simple Therapy podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs it. Your support means so much. You can learn more or get in touch at asimpletherapypodcast.com. And remember, let's keep it simple and keep showing up.